Thank you and good afternoon to our esteemed guests, dignitaries, faculty, students, and friends. It is my honor to serve as the president of Borough Manhattan Community College, where knowledge thrives, diversity flourishes, and innovation is at the core of our mission. Today, we gather under the auspices of our recently launched Office of Diplomatic Engagement and Training, which embodies our commitment to fostering global dialogue and understanding in an increasingly interconnected world. At BMCC, we know that education is a powerful tool for change. We are dedicated to not only empowering our students with knowledge, but also preparing them to become global citizens and leaders and active participants in shaping the future of our society. The establishment of the Office of Diplomatic Engagement and Training exemplifies our goal to provide our community with the skills and insights necessary to navigate the complexities of global diplomacy and international relations. Today's topic, the governance of artificial intelligence, could not be more timely. As we delve into the digital age, artificial intelligence, or AI, is reshaping the way we live, work, play, and even interact. As AI technologies rapidly develop and integrate into our daily lives, from healthcare to education and beyond, it is imperative that we address the ethical, social, and regulatory frameworks that govern their use. While AI offers incredible opportunities for innovation and efficiency, it also presents unique challenges that require thoughtful governance and ethical considerations. This discourse is crucial as we stand at the crossroads of technological advancements and the implications for our society. It is our responsibility to engage with these issues, to seek solutions that promote inclusivity and equity, and to ensure that AI serves the greater good. I'd like to take the moment to thank Dr. Eleanor Toombs, the head of Anticipatory Action and Innovation at the United Nations University Center for Policy Research, for joining us today. Let's give her a round of applause. We know that it is an especially busy time for the diplomatic community and appreciate your presence. We are incredibly honored to welcome and extend our heartfelt gratitude to Rector Marwala, our distinguished keynote speaker, who will facilitate today's talk. The Rector is head of United Nations University and the Undersecretary General of the United Nations. His insights and expertise will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of AI governance and inspire us as we move forward. The Q&A segment will be moderated by none only than Dr. Daniel Katz, Director of our Office of Diplomatic Engagement and Training. He's also serving as today's host. We look forward to a lively, innovative discussion. Together, let us engage in meaningful dialogue, share innovative ideas, and work towards a future where artificial intelligence is governed responsibly and ethically for the benefit of all. Please enjoy today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, President Monroe, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Daniel Katz. I'm Director of the BMCC Office of Diplomatic Engagement and Training. Today's program will feature keynote remarks from Rector Marwala, after which we'll proceed to a question and answer session. You will notice that you have note cards adjacent to your seats. If you have questions for the speaker, please write them on the cards and pass them to the end of the aisle where they will be picked up. We were truly honored and privileged to welcome to BMCC UN University Rector and Undersecretary General Tshilidzi Marwala. Professor Marwala is the Rector of the United Nations University and Undersecretary General of the UN. Prior to taking up the role of UNU Rector on the 1st of March 2023, he served as Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg in South Africa from January 2018 through February 2023. He had previously served as that university's Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization and Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. From 2003 to 2008, Professor Marwala progressively held the positions of Associate Professor and Full Professor of the University of the Witwatersrand, South Africa. He was Executive Assistant to the Technical Director at South African Breweries previously, and before that, Postdoctoral Research Associate at Imperial College, London. Professor Marwala has been a visiting scholar professor at universities in the US, the UK, China, and South Africa. He has extensive academic policy, management, and international experience and is a co-holder of 5 patents. His research has been multidisciplinary, involving the theory and applications of artificial intelligence to engineering, social science, economics, politics, finance, and medicine. He has served on a variety of global and national policymaking bodies and has worked with such United Nations entities as UNESCO, UNICEF, the WHO, and WIPO. He holds a PhD degree from the University of Cambridge, a Master of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and a Bachelor of Science degree from Case Western Reserve University. He has also completed management and leadership programs at the Columbia Business School and Harvard Business School. Professor Marwala is inter alia a member of the UN Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board, a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the World Academy of Sciences, the Academy of Science of South Africa, and the African Academy of Sciences. He is the author of more than 25 books, including Leadership Lessons from Books I Have Read and Leading in the 21st Century, The Call for a New Type of African Leader. Among the awards that Professor Marwala has received are South Africa's highest honor and the Academy of South Africa's Science for Society Gold Medal. He was named the 2021 IT Personality of the Year by the Institute of IT Professionals South Africa. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rector Marwala.
Good afternoon. And thank you very much, Daniel, for that introduction. The headquarters of the United Nations University is in Tokyo, and that is where I actually met Daniel when he came to attend a conference, the academic conference of the United Nations. And then he says, please come to BMCC. And of course, when I get many invitations, and for me, I firmly believe that as an official of the United Nations, one of my primary responsibilities is to take the values of United Nations to the people. So when I am asked a question such as the one that I was asked by Daniel, the answer is almost always yes. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm here for the first time. Over the last few days at the United Nations, we have actually been working quite hard. There is the so-called the Pact of the Future, which was adopted by the General Assembly. Of course, it was not unanimous because things that matter require effort to achieve. And within that pact of the future, there is something called the Global Digital Compact. And I'll talk about the Global Digital Compact quite a bit going forward. And then there is also the knowledge that has been gained from the Secretary General's high-level advisory body on AI. And of course, AI is here, and it needs to be governed. It needs to be governed. I actually got into AI almost by accident. When I arrived in the United Kingdom, I did not know what I was going to do my PhD on. And then I went to see one of the professors, and the professor said, no, 2000 is coming. Yeah, 2000 is coming, and there will be all these bells that are going to ring, and we don't know what is going to happen. Can you model that? I said, no. And then I went to the dining hall. I was sitting next to Nando de Freitas. Now he said he was at Google DeepMind. Now he's at Microsoft. And he was studying artificial intelligence. And that is how I got into artificial intelligence. But earlier on, much earlier on, when I was still a young boy growing up in my village in South Africa, I was very close to my grandmother. And my grandmother used to make clay pots. She used to make these clay pots. And I would accompany her to go to the river to look for clay. And then she will obviously, it's a serious business. You will go from one part of the clay source to another to get the correct type of clay. When I was at Case Western Reserve University, this whole idea is called material selection. Material selection is absolutely a very important issue and is very relevant today than ever before. And I will talk about this, I would elaborate on this much later. So, she would actually choose the correct clay. And when I went to Cambridge, there was a professor called Professor Seaborn. He actually wrote a software of material selection. And companies, whether they are telecommunication companies, whether they are car companies, they spend a great deal of time actually selecting the material they need. And as we live at a time when sustainable development is an important factor, I'm disappointed to say that a contemporary company, when it selects a material, it looks for two things. One, maximization of performance. Two, minimization of cost. And of course, we as the United Nations are calling for a third criteria, which is the sustainability of the material choices you make. So my grandmother will go and select the correct clay. She did not even have Professor Seaborn's software, but she knew exactly what to do. And then she will come back with the pots, and then she will form these pots. After she formed these pots, she will put it in the sun so that they can dry. And then, of course, they are not strong enough. Then she will put it in a furnace so that they can be hardened. As she is burning these pots, they will be so hot that I could see the red reflections in her eyes. And then she will allow them to cool slowly. We call that simulated, the cooling schedule of simulated of the annealing process. And in AI, you have an AI algorithm called simulated annealing that is actually coming from that. And then she will knock each pot and listen to it. And she will knock one and she will say, this is a good pot. She will knock another one and she will say, this is a bad pot. And I will ask her, why do you think this is a good pot? You say, because it rings for a long time. I say, why do you say this one is a bad pot? Because it rings for a short time. Of course, when I was at Case Western, not too far from here, Professor Prohl, who taught me dynamics, told me that if it rings for a long time, it is a lightly damped structure. If it rings for a short time, it is a damped structure. Probably there is fluid that is trapped inside, Of course, for those of you who are engineers, you know about damping coefficients. My grandmother did not know any of those concepts, but she understood the science behind it organically. And then, of course, as she was trading these pots, she started throwing away good pots. Because as she was aging, her hearing was deteriorating. So when I decided to do a PhD in AI, I said, no, I'm going to automate this whole process. So my PhD was about fault identification of structures using neural networks. So of course, we measure the vibration of a structure, we collect the data, and then we take that data and analyze it, and then input it into an artificial intelligence which is trained, and then it will be able to tell you whether a structure is good or not. Same concept as my grandmother's non-destructive testing of pots using her ears. That automation process does not age like my grandmother. Of course, the sensors actually become old and so on and so forth. Now, embedded in that concept, and I'm going to link it to the governance of AI, is really 4 things. The first one is data. When we talk about the governance of AI, we are really talking about data. And then, of course, the second aspect is the algorithm itself. I was using a neural network, which is the most dominant AI algorithm, And that algorithm must be processed using computing. So we have to govern the data, we have to govern the algorithm, we have to govern the computing, and of course, there is a domain, of course, for my grandmother, it was the integrity of port determination system. We need to govern that, When we come to the issues of data, there are issues of data acquisition that needs to be governed. If the data is being gathered from human beings, then there are issues of informed consent that needs to be governed. If it is, for example, medical data, there are issues of privacy. That if I'm a doctor and I gather that data, I have to protect it so that I protect the identity of people. And sometimes that data has to be transmitted across borders. So the issue of cross-border data flow is actually important, and it needs to be governed. Sometimes, and this is a very important issue, You don't have all the data that you need. And there is the concept of using AI system to synthesize data. In fact, according to the Gardner Group, they are saying that by 2025, almost 80%, say 60% of all the data that is going to be used to train AI system will be synthetic data. That also needs to be governed, and me and Dr. Eleanor actually have a policy brief on how to govern synthetic data. That data has to be analyzed. There are elements of governance that needs to be done there. And that data sometimes has to be stored. If you store it without any security, privacy might actually be violated. And then, of course, the second part is the computing. Now, when you take this AI system, you need to use some computer that you're going to use to analyze. And of course, with a drive for profit maximization, people are forgetting the concept of computational efficiency. I mean, this is an example of a book that we wrote where we were using Hamiltonian Monte Carlo methods in machine learning. And the Hamiltonian part is the optimization part. But of course, the optimization, many people, especially businesses, are saying that the cost is very, very low. It's very, very high. You know, we can always, it's low, so we can chase the performance and ignore it because the performance is going to pay for it. You know, and we know what the consequences of that is. The consequences of that is that it degrades our environment. Of course, embedded in computing is the issue of semiconductor. The Biden administration has even an act called the CHIPS Act. It's a geopolitical issue over the so-called GPUs that are used in large models. CPUs are still important, you know, and we need to balance the two, but GPUs are strategic. What we are saying is that it cannot all be about profit maximization, especially if this computing can be used for us to understand or to build big simulation models to understand climate change, for example. You know. And then, of course, there are other issues, the cloud computing. One of the things that I now experience is that I can no longer be able to work when I'm on a plane because my computer is trying to save my information on the cloud, which is almost always restricted if you are on a plane. That's a good example, you know. But on, you know, and then of course we have strategic issues like quantum computing that will have huge implications on cybersecurity. Whoever is going to crack, to develop a viable quantum computing capabilities will obviously be able to crack all the cyber issues. And then there are issues of energy that is used in computing. The water that is used to cool these computers. All these issues must actually be governed. And then there is the issue of governing the application itself. And governing the application itself is actually quite a big problem. And maybe, what are some of the things that we need to consider when we govern the applications? Let me just go back to a slide that I skipped. I think we must agree on the values that will be used for governing. I think one of the values is the issue of openness and transparency of these algorithms. I think the issue of privacy is important. I think the issue of truth is also important. I think the issue of inclusion is also important. I think the issue of diversity of data sets is important because otherwise algorithms are going to discriminate. I think the issue of safety and security. I was in the room when President Biden was speaking today at the General Assembly, and he talked about the security of AI. And then you have the issues of ethics and equity. My worry is that when you are actually talking about these values in isolation, it's simple. We want AI that is transparent, so that if it is used to determine whether candidate A, or maybe let me use the name John, who went to a bank to look for the loan, and they used an AI algorithm for credit scoring, and they have denied him the loan. Somebody must be able to explain why the algorithm has actually made that decision. Easy. But unfortunately, it's not as easy as that, because transparency normally comes at the expense of security. The more transparent we are, the more vulnerable we are to cyber attacks. So the governance model must actually balance these issues. Now, let me go back to this issue of governing. And this is an example of the work that we did quite a number of years ago. It was an artificial larynx. So somebody has lost their voice box, normally because of cancer. And they can still move their tongue. So the aim of this was to develop a system that will just track the movement of a tongue and be able to recreate what somebody was going to say if they had a voice box. If their voice box has not been removed, you know. And then you go to collect all this data. And it's a huge amount of data, you know. And you train this system. It works very well, you know. Then we tested it on South African languages. We first tested it in my language. It's called Venda. It worked very well. Then we tested it on a language called isiXhosa. That is the mother tongue of Nelson Mandela. isiXhosa is a Bantu language, but the clicking part is from the first people of South Africa called the Khoisan. The Khoisan are the indigenous people of South Africa. I'm sure, I know they have been misrepresented by a movie called, about the Bushmen. I think it was called, was it The Dead Who Shall Arise? And we realized that every time you click, the algorithm actually consider it noise. That is algorithmic discrimination. And I've been asking myself, why? I went and studied somewhere this clicking language of Southern Africa that is spoken by Khoisan people. What is their evolution? And they say, no. Many scientists now believe that these are the oldest languages in the world. Because if you are Khoisan, you can speak them without a voice box. You know, because it's all in the tongue. You just move the tongue. And the clicks come from the mouth, not from the voice box, you know. So it did not work it did not work for clicks. Why didn't it work for clicks? It did not work for clicks because Xhosa is predominantly Bantu. It's predominantly not a clicking language. the clicks are only 5%. So it's the tails, you know. And of course, this violates a very important principle that I talked about earlier on, the principle of inclusivity, which is a very important principle. And of course, some of the fixes that you can apply are possible, some you can't. For example, if you have a language that is spoken by 70,000 people, and we have such languages in Southern Africa, you can never have enough database to build models that will equally represent that language when you compare it to English. So that becomes unavoidable algorithmic discrimination. There's another example of the work that we, as the United Nations, we are very interested in, the issues of conflict. AI and conflict is a very important issue. The application of AI in the military is an interesting issue. I'm reminded of a book written by an English writer called Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the age of hope. It was the age of despair, you know. So AI is the same thing. There are optimistic part of AI and the pessimistic part of AI. In the military, if you can use AI to be able to predict conflict and intervene before they happen. That is good. But you can also use AI to weaponize, to make weapons much more dangerous. And that also needs to be governed. Now, how do we govern AI? We need policies and standards. And as the United Nations University, we spend a lot of time issuing policy briefs, guidelines, and so on and so forth. Secondly, we need regulations and laws. And of course, for us, there are very important documents that we think all laws must observe. That is the UN Charter and the Declaration of Human Rights. Very important issues. And then we also need appropriate human and organizational behaviors. Because it's really about people, whether they are users, whether they are creators of this technology, they must have the right set. I mean, at least they should know what the values are. And if they know, we hope they are going to abide by those values so that you can maximize the benefits of this technology and minimize the harms of this technology. But it's not just about individuals, it's also about organizations. Because the more we automate systems, organizations become a much more living entity than ever before, making decisions that have life and death implications. And that also needs to be governed. And we also need to have mechanisms or incentives so that those who do are incentivized to do good. Those who deploy are incentivized to deploy this technology in a good manner. And of course, the mechanisms will also include the disincentives. And finally, we need effective institutional structures. In the high-level advisory body on AI, there is a recommendation now that has been accepted of establishing the International Scientific Panel on AI at the United Nations. This is a structure that is necessary as we govern AI from an international perspective. Not everything should be governed at an international level. For example, I don't think the United Nations must govern which algorithm you use for which application. You know, I don't think the AI, the United Nations must govern which algorithms you should use to train AI system. You know, that is too technical for an international law. Then you will have things that will have to be governed at the national level. You know, in the United States, there is also some guidelines that are going to be developed. In the European Union, we have the EU Act. In the African continent, the African Union has the Continental AI strategy, and so on and so forth. So you will have these things, you know. And of course, because all these governance models are going to play at the international, sometimes at the regional level, sometimes at the national level, sometimes just focused on the industry itself, how you develop some of these technologies and deploy them, they need to be harmonized so that you don't have missing pieces. And then, of course, at the United Nations, there are a number of issues that we are doing to deal with this issue of AI. I've already talked about the high-level advisory body on AI. The Global Digital Compact is very important because digital technologies are not democratically distributed across the world. There are lots of people who are actually left out of this digital economy. By the way, it's not even just between countries. Even within countries, even the richest of countries always have sections of the population that are not fully participating in this. And we need to deal with those issues. And of course, we adopted the Pact of the Future yesterday. I was there when it was adopted. The World Health Organization has developed AI guidelines. In medicine, one of our divisions called UNESCO has done something called the ethics of AI, and so on and so forth. And our university is obviously starting an AI institute. So in summary, the governance model must govern data, algorithm, computing, and whatever the algorithm actually gives. And we need to apply it quite responsibly. And to do so, we need standards, mechanisms, policy and regulations, institutional structures. We need to have human behavior, which means our institutions must teach these values at school. We need AI values, and we need laws. And in conclusion, I have a few recommendations which really just summarize what I have said. Establish AI standards. Some of these standards will be at the national level. Some of them will be industry specific. Some of them will be at the international level. You need to govern data, algorithms, computing, and applications. You need to establish policies and regulations. You know, when you talk about regulations, it's actually a contested terrain. You know. And finally, it is up to all of us, by being good citizens, by educating ourselves to understand this technology, that we are going to do what is right, and we are going to encourage our governments to create mechanisms to democratize this technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rector Marwala, for really your insightful remarks and providing us such a sweeping overview of AI governance. And you really have a unique vantage point, having been involved in these deliberations with Secretary General and other bodies of the UN for some time now. And I guess now you have the perspective of in the wake of the Summit of the Future and the passage of the Global Digital Compact. Can you give us a sense, should we be optimistic about, I guess, the road ahead in terms of cooperation between national governments and civil society, and how should we think about the role of all of us, in terms of the youth that are here in the audience and others that will inherit this future where AI is such a big part of their lives?
Yeah, no, I think we should always be cautiously optimistic. And the reason for that is because there is a lot of work that needs to be done by us as citizens, by the United Nations as the international body that has been created to bring harmony to the world through many mechanisms, including the international humanitarian law and the UN Charter. And amidst all these things, you have powerful players who are motivated by profit maximization concept, So we have to be cautiously optimistic, knowing very well that, like anything, it requires a huge amount of effort on our part to ensure that this technology actually works for us.
And BMCC is very actively involved in AI research in our Computer Information Systems Department and our students. And I'm hoping actually all of you, please write your questions that you have and pass them to our interns who are passing through the aisles here. But I guess for our students who are thinking about careers in the international domain, how can they contribute to this future that's laid out in the Global Digital Compact, and really for a pro-social AI that helps us build towards fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals?
I think, obviously these are just my views. I think the first one is to educate ourselves about this technology. The second one is to participate and sometimes even build institutions. I was very happy to see the president of the former president of the student body. And I think we need to have student organizations that just deals with this technology, where we participate so that we can be able to shape it. I think we need to support the work that is being done by the United Nations. We need to read the reports that are coming out. I think it is very important that we go and download the high-level advisory body report on AI and read it. We need to incorporate some of these ideas into our curriculum. I must confess, every time I look at the curriculum that we teach, we still teach AI without actually talking about the values of AI. The computer scientists, in many ways, take an algorithmic view of AI. And I think we need to bring a little bit of humanity into AI. Not a little bit, a great deal of humanity into AI, so that we are able to deal with the issues that actually matter.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to get questions from the audience. Yes. Oh, yes. We have a student towards the back. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Irvin. I'm the current student government director at the school. Again, thank you for the presentation. My question talks about implementing AI curriculum to universities and how that kind of looks for you, and more specifically, how do you guys go against over-homogenized answers for students within AI and implementing it into a university setting?
Firstly, I must confess this is a very difficult question. I'm going to attempt to answer it. But a good question, difficult. And of course, this is really because these are difficult issues. Now, what are the elements of education that I think are important? I think on the first principle levels, is really the issue of literacy. Literacy is just know what this technology is about. Know what are some of the elements of it. Know about some of the risks. Know about some of the opportunities. Know about some of how it is applied. Know about how it has historically developed, because it will give you maybe a better view of how it is going to proceed going into the future. Secondly, on the second order level, those people who are interested in actually the technical part of AI, my advice is that get a multidisciplinary view of AI. I'll give you an example. Google DeepMind a few years back developed something called, developed an algorithm to solve a Chinese version of chess called Go. It's called AlphaGo, and that algorithm that was used is called it uses the principles of reinforcement learning. I was not introduced to the principle of reinforcement learning in an engineering class, because it's not an engineering concept. I was introduced to that concept in a psychology class. I took psychology when I was an undergrad, and then they had this story about, I think it was a Russian psychologist called Pavlov. And he used to have his dogs. He will ring the bell and then feed them. You ring the bell and feed them. And after a while, when he rings the bell, the dogs will be expecting to eat. And he called that ringing the bell and feeding them reinforcement. What was he reinforcing? The relationship between ringing the bell and eating and being fed, And then when Mr. Sutton, who was a computer scientist, developed reinforcement learning in machine learning, he did not invent the concept. He did not even pretend to invent it. He called it by what it is called in psychology, which is reinforcement learning. Perhaps he added algorithm at the end, and there's no way he could have been able to know about that if he had not immersed himself in the psychology literature. So I think read widely.
So we have, yes, please.
Sure. Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Marwala. My name is Ignacio Valdez. I'm a business management student here. just have a question. I know you kind of dived a little into this question, but wanted you to elaborate a bit. So what role do you envision AI playing in tackling the UN's Sustainable Development Goals? And how can young students like ourselves align their careers with these initiatives?
Well, I think AI plays significant role in Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals are represented by this pin, which I'm going to give to you, Daniel, before I leave, because it's a very important pin. You know, there are 17 of them, and they were adopted in 2015 with a timeline that they have to be achieved by 2030. Halfway through the time, we are actually lagging behind, significantly lagging behind. Now, what are some of these Sustainable Development Goals? Let's just think about good health and well-being and the role of AI in that. It is clear that AI is able to read medical images better than radiologists. This is actually the concept of reading medical images using AI is actually quite old. I mean, I remember me and my collaborator, Donald Rubin, in 2005, already were writing papers on this. Of course, we did not have huge amounts of data, we did not have huge amounts of computing, and therefore the systems would not have worked. The principles are actually still the same. If you look at the issue of education, the role of AI, the role of AI in education is actually quite extensive. If you look at the issue of climate change, of course AI is dangerous to climate change because it consumes a lot of energy, it consumes a lot of water. But you can build much more robust models to be able to understand, to help you understand what is going to happen and plan better, you know. If you look at issues of food security, SDG 1 and 2 is about reduction of hunger, zero hunger, and reduction of poverty. In agriculture, agri-tech, whether it is AI-enabled drones that are able to look at space and recommend crop rotation processes, you know, is actually quite extensive.
We have several additional questions from the audience. So we have a student here, Mackay Patterson, who previously worked at the Consulate General of Jamaica and previously also worked with their permanent mission to the UN, and wondering what framework would be put in place to ensure that smaller nations like Jamaica are actively involved in the decision-making processes of global AI policy and implementation.
I think the role is very, very important. I'll give you an example. I've already talked about the language models and other resourced languages that you find in many small countries. You know, data. How do we incorporate their data set into the AI world? It has to be done fairly. I don't think the current exchange of data between companies and people is fair. I think it even becomes more unfair when the countries are small. You know, Jamaica is a fantastic country with a rich history. I particularly like its music. And it will be very interesting how we can train AI systems so that we can also make music that is as nice as music that you find in Jamaica, you know. And these are just some of the few issues that we can be able to get Jamaica to bring, yeah.
Question from Naomi. In which way do you think the U.S. can safeguard AI systems so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands?
Well, I'm not an American, so
But I guess supposedly mitigating the adverse potential for AI deployment, just in general.
yeah. Look, I think we know what needs to be done. We know what needs to be governed. We know how to govern it. We are developing many of the mechanisms to govern it. I would say at first we need to find out what are the issues that we need to put into place. I think some of the weaknesses is that we don't have all the standards so that you can't harm. Secondly, we need to have the laws. For example, I believe that lethal autonomous weapons must actually be banned internationally, the same way we have a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. We need to have lethal weapons, autonomous lethal weapons, non-proliferation processes in place. It's a slightly more difficult, I must confess, because AI is a very simple technology. It's actually quite a simple technology in many ways. So it is easier to spread it. I think the limiting factor is computational capacity and access to semiconductors. Yeah.
And as I know, running short on time, but a question generally: how can we support the work being done at the UN?
Well, in a number of ways. I think the first one is to, in your own political consciousness and your political choices, just to acknowledge that there is a need for some form of international governance and listen, and try to infuse it into policy and political landscape. And I would imagine that almost everybody in this room lives in a democratic country where you can actually be able to infuse ideas into the political process without fear. And by the way, it's a privilege that you should never take for granted, because we still have many people who do not have that privilege. And then, secondly, the United Nations is a busy organization. Once a month, just go to the website and see what are some of the important issues that are happening there, and ask yourself, what can I do as an individual to effect change, to be part of the change?
I think we've covered the other areas, and I'll provide all of these to Rector Marwala so he has them. Would like to really thank you again profoundly for joining us today for this discussion and for being with us at BMCC. Thank you again, Rector Marwala. Please join me, round of applause.